Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another midweek madness episode with me, Cornish-Knight, and we are diving into another co-op session with myself and Defoax in another dungeon crawling adventure of Barony. Now, just letting you all know in advance, this is all the footage I was able to capture due to data corruption on my end. A lot of this session was lost, but I attempted to bring you as much possible footage as was available. It was actually a very interesting session. We picked up some really interesting bits of equipment and learned some fascinating tricks and tips about the game, which I shall go into more detail for you presently. As always, as we've been doing lately, we've just been pressing the random button and choosing, not knowing who we're going to play as. I believe Defoax was playing as a cleric and I was playing as a healer, a class I have not played before. And you can see my my obvious optimism for the coming game. Having a cleric and a healer in your party normally isn't a recommended usage party setup, I believe you would call it. It's not the wisest thing to do, but there's not much you can really do at this time. So I just grabbed some torches and I charged in after him. Yeah, I mean, this was a really good game. I had a lot of fun playing it with him. I mean, I wish I'd been able to show you more. Unfortunately, data corruption is just how it goes and I was unable to salvage it. I believe Defoax will have more of the gameplay on his end since I was hosting, and what tends to happen is when the game crashes, the person hosting loses. Basically, the person hosting loses the video footage, I found in my experience. I was using Bandicam for this, so it was the same, because Bandicam's normally quite a good video capture software. As obviously you can see us scouting around the first level, we haven't got any minotaur encounters, so we're just being really careful. Also, both our characters are relatively weak at this stage. Neither of us are wearing any armour, so we can die very easily, so we're just being really careful. Interestingly, the healer is actually a surprisingly weak character. You can just see Defoax using the good old-fashioned throwing an object trick. Defoax, I mean, the problem I find with a lot of the characters in this game is the fact that unless you're picking like a wizard or a cleric, yeah, that rock was cursed. I picked it up and I couldn't get rid of it, so I was desperate to try and throw it away. The problem I find is that unless you're playing like a wizard or a cleric or a straight out rogue or merchant, I mean, the merchant is obvious for the role you can do, which is like analysing or identifying objects, but stuff like the you'd think like the healer would be really good at identifying objects, but they're not. And it was quite frustrating. It was like I was forced to rely upon the Defoax again to identify items, which I don't really like doing, because I feel like it's not fair on him to do it. But I suppose by this point we've just sort of come to a grudging acceptance that our random character choices prevent us from doing anything. I mean, it takes me a while just to identify fruit, which is not fantastic. I mean, it's not as bad as the warrior. I can't even identify cheese, which is the easiest item to identify in this game. But yeah, I mean, as the run goes itself, we're not doing too bad. I mean, got some relatively good XP, and just sort of exploring. Being very hesitant, open doors is never a good sign in this. Skeleton. Waiting for the warrior to go up ahead. The warrior, I find the clerics tend to do bonus damage against undead, so it's always useful to send them up. I don't know if that's true or not, but if they're following the standard D&D lore, clerics tended to be able to do bonus damage against undead creatures. Or maybe it's just a mace thing, blunt damage or something. Just me trying to re-identify the apple again. Oh god, it was so embarrassing. Yeah, I really wish I could have brought you more footage, but it was basically a mistake on my part. I didn't save. I normally save on every floor, or every other floor, which means that if something happens, I at least have enough of a pool of video footage to basically allow us to patch together a couple of episodes at least for your viewing pleasure. unfortunately I was so enjoying this game with the Fuax that I forgot to do my usual protocol of doing multiple saves. Yeah, this was unpleasant. Getting jumped by several spiders at an early level is not great. So just quickly, the benefit of the cleric is that you can get rid of a lot of stats debuffs and heal very easily. And here's another little thing, if you guys didn't realise, there's an exploit in the game that if you can shoot through doorway. Well, you can't shoot through doorways, but you can shoot through. I suppose you call like portcullises. I suppose that's what they're called, or gated doorways. Stuff like this with the iron barred gates. You can basically, or barred gates. You can basically shoot through them with ranged weapons, which means you can kill a lot of enemies. Though I do believe you have to open it and close it. That's why I saw him do it. I don't know. I'll have to ask the Fuax if that's the case. But I mean, it's realistic. He says it was like not an exploit, but sort of like a trick. But in real life, it would be completely feasible. Those kinds of things were designed for that purpose. They were designed to allow people to shoot through them at things on the other side, while the other things couldn't get at you. They were a perfect defensive structure. That's how they are. So there you go, him shooting at the troll, and I just closed the gate to help him out. I mean, at this level we wouldn't normally be fighting trolls with melee weapons, or even with ranged weapons really, and not unless you're something like an arcanist or a battle mage. I mean, they are really hard fights. And I just decided to stand behind him at this point and try and give him a bit of extra light so we can see what he's doing. Don't know if it helped or not. Hopefully it did. I mean, I do like the light mechanic in this game. It's very useful. I mean, you can be very much a team player with it. But the thing was, but at this point neither of us had any like illumination spells, because the healer doesn't start with them, neither does the cleric, so you have to sort of rely on torches. And I find the cleric is actually a relatively hard class to level in this game, combat-wise, because you get most of your XP from doing. You get most of your XP from killing monsters, and as a healer, you really don't want to be getting into combat unless you know you're going to win, because you don't have the health for it at all. So it's one of these hard situations where we've both this is a nice thing. Got the Fuax shooting at it, and I decide to hide around the corner and power up a charge attack and just hit him and try and critical damage him. That's quite a nice tactic to do with this kind of thing, is have one person hide and the other person sort of aggro the monster towards them, and the person who's hiding sort of does critical damage. Because normally what will happen is that the monster will get close to the other person and then will aggro onto the other character, so it can be a bit tricky to do. Corners, don't you just love them? The ultimate weapon in your arsenal, hiding around a corner and smacking him in the face when they don't see it. Yep, so now we're sort of pressing further on into the game. I mean, to be honest, about halfway through the game we start suffering from some really weird bugs and sort of glitches and stuff, so I mean, there was a point where the Fuax kept on trying to exit the level and getting teleported back to the start of the level, and he was getting rather frustrated, so, and you probably see it on his footage. But it was rather strange. I mean, we always seem to have the weirdest luck when the two of us play together. I mean, it is rather strange. I don't know if if the two of us are just too awesome for the game and the game can't take it. Joking, obviously. I mean, this game is not a friendly game at all. I've introduced it to several associates and friends of mine, and they've all basically said this game is absolutely murderous, and I agree, it is a very hard game, I'm not lying. I mean, if you go into it thinking, oh, it's a cutie 8-bit dungeon game, it's going to be fine, it's like, no, this is like the 8-bit equivalent of Dark Souls. It's brutal on single player, it's brutal. I mean, it's easier in multiplayer. I've always personally believed that this game is, the more people you have to it, the easier the game becomes. And I've always heavily believed that they should have scaled it so that the more people you have playing, the harder the creatures are, because if you play with 3 people like I've done before with Wizard Fists and the Fuax, it becomes an absolute cakewalk the earlier levels. I mean, the later levels, yeah, certainly they can become a bit more challenging, but the earlier ones, if you're not doing what we do, which is basically play random characters, if you have a warrior, a wizard and a healer, it becomes a relatively easy game. The first half of the game anyway, and the later half of yeah, I get jumped by a skeleton here and absolutely just sort of sprint for it. That's a good thing if you guys are interested. Always keep an ear out on the music. When the music changes, you tend to, well, you always do get attacked when the music changes. But yeah, I mean, personally, I would like to see like a scaling difficulty, like they'd have in some other games, which was the better that you were doing, the harder the game became. I don't know if that would be possible, or at least if the more people you had, the harder the game was. I mean, literally have for every extra person that you had playing, like the enemies had 50% more health with 50% more damage, or just like 50% more of them. Because I find, especially on the earlier game, if you have like 2 or 3 people and you don't have a minotaur, it's a relatively easy game. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with that. This game is hard enough as it is normally, but I'd like a bit more challenge with more people. I mean, leave your thoughts in the comment section. I mean, do you think the game could be made harder for more people? I mean, have like an increased difficulty, or just like have a difficulty slider where we could artificially increase the difficulty if we wanted it. I mean, that would be a really cool thing to have. Ooh, picked up a lantern here. I do like lanterns in this game. I mean, torches are fine and all, but I do like a nice metal lantern. There's some really interesting ones. They used to make, this is a fun fact for everyone who doesn't know, the Vikings used to make lanterns out of bone. Not the actual like lantern itself, but the glass for it, because what you can do is you can take antlers or horn, and you can soften it by using a heat, because it's basically, all that a horn is basically sort of like a nail, like your fingernail, and if you heat up the horn and then flatten it out, you can basically polish it, and like you can polish it and sand it down to it's really thin and basically transparent, and it acts exactly like glass. I mean, it's not as nice as glass obviously, but it still functions like glass. So you have these incredible like bone lanterns, like antler paned lanterns that the Vikings used to have, which are really cool. And I've always liked them. I mean, there's something about them. I always have the image in my hand of the old like gas lamps in like Victorian England. I always liked that. And again, you can see our screwy luck kicking into play, which was that in our last playthrough we never had enough food, and the first shop we find is basically food, and the Fuax basically makes a comment of it himself. The one time we don't need it. Yeah, I should have actually mentioned this to you guys. We actually turned hunger off for this playthrough, partly because the Fuax basically argued it was the fact that enough people had probably seen us dying of starvation by this point for it to lose its interest. Also, it does remove an aspect from the game. I mean, I love the hunger elements. I mean, 2 people and 1 person, it's a really good thing to have, but the problem is that the game is rather screwy sometimes, so you could have like no food and the hunger mechanic will literally just beat you black and blue. Or like what we did, which was we turned hunger off and then we had nothing but food, which is really frustrating. And again, we come into the age-old problems of NPCs, which is they can be extremely useful, but god do they steal your equipment. I really don't like them stealing equipment in this game. And my opinion is made abundantly clear later on. You will see it towards the end of this video by what I mean, but I'm not going to spoil it. But, oh my god, I hate NPCs stealing equipment. Bane of my existence. I need to be a bit more proactive. I find the Fuax levels up a lot quicker than I do. I don't know if it was because I was playing as a more squishy character and I didn't want to die, so I was being hesitant. But I did find myself falling behind level-wise compared to him. Didn't help I didn't actually have any armour at this point. This is one of the other things that I don't like about not being able to identify items as a character, is the fact that the other person tends to get a lot more equipment quickly, which is I'm not annoyed by it. It's like his right as the person who's basically identifying stuff, but it would be nice to basically not go for like the first 2 levels just on the skin of my pants. Is a bit frustrating. So maybe next time I was had to take a risk. Ah yes, the ominous trolls that dot this landscape. To be honest, the trolls aren't actually a massive issue. If you stumble into them in the dark or something, yes, because obviously they do massive damage, but as long as you're careful, you can relatively avoid them. I mean, we got a bit greedy here and decided to try and get some XP by doing it, and I got very greedy and attempted to melee a troll, which is never a good thing. And I thought I'll do the old trick of hiding around the corner because it must be dead by now. Nope. Beats my head in with a rock. Splatters my cranial juices all across the landscape. And to save you watching Defuax basically walking around picking up my equipment for the next 5 minutes, I've basically skipped forward a piece to where we go down to the next level. I mean, there's not a lot you see. He's killed everything, so it's basically looting a floor, which is never that enjoyable to watch. And I know you guys want to dive right back into the action. So, oh, we had the worst luck. I mean, to be honest, it was really bad. I mean, I don't know if you will see it in this, but we had, I think, 4 run-ins with the Minotaur, maybe 3. But I know for a fact that on 2 floors it was like literally the Minotaur turned up, so we fled to the next floor, and the Minotaur turned up, so we fled to the next floor, and it was the Minotaur turned up. And it was like, seriously? How many times you got to send the Minotaur after us? Because I don't particularly like fighting the Minotaur, I never have. I prefer just to run straight for it. Defuax is a more balanced player. He'll prefer to basically loot the floor a bit before heading for the exit. But I'm not. When it comes to this game, especially if I'm playing a healer, I'm a massive coward and I want to get away from the Minotaur as soon as possible. So yeah, we got quite good with the NPCs. They seem to be quite powerful in this playthrough. I don't know if I mean, I know I talk a lot of smack about the NPCs, to be honest, and I'm not going to lie, I don't like the fact that they steal a lot of equipment, and the negative aspects of having NPCs, if they do that, is always apparent, but they are quite useful in some ways, especially as sort of like cannon fodder. I know that sounds mean, but if you're fighting something, you can just leave your NPC to it and run for it. As you can see, where I believe we're like on the 3rd floor by this level, and I'm still wearing no armour whatsoever, so I'm a bit nervous. But yeah, I mean, I have no problems throwing the NPCs at enemies. This is when I sort of realised at this point that we're outside like dozens of skeletons. It's like, just what you want, skeletons. Because I'm squishy as hell, and it doesn't actually take a lot to kill the NPCs, which I always found really strange, which is that it takes absolutely ages for you to kill an NPC, but the enemies can do it like in 5 seconds. Which I always found a bit annoying. Just trying to get some more XP, because by this point I realised that I'm falling behind in, level-wise, and he's like twice my level, which is not particularly fantastic. So I sort of go on a murder spree and try and grab as much stuff as possible. Because the easiest way to get levels in this game is to kill monsters rather than like identifying stuff. You can level up through identification and like skill usage, but it's just easier to kill stuff, to be honest. If you're playing single player or 2-player, the experience normally isn't a problem because you get enough monsters to keep yourself going, but in this, I don't know, I think I was more hesitant because I was playing as a healer character, and I think I got used to basically sort of staying behind Defuax and letting the monsters aggro onto him and trying to then finish them off, which I don't think benefited me really in the long run. It started to actually become a bit of a problem where I was actually having difficulty fighting stuff, because as we got deeper into the actual game it was, wow, I'm not doing much damage weapon wise, and obviously because I'm a healing character I wasn't healing people, so it was, I don't know, I think in hindsight I mean I'm a guy that likes to team play, so I gave my healing spells to Defuax, which is a nice thing I think to do because it means that he has more survivability, but for me it screwed me a bit, because what happened was, normally the way you sort of get your casting skill up as a healer, I find, is that you heal your other party members, and there was no need for that because Defuax had a way to heal it himself, so yeah, it was not fantastic. I mean, you can see me here, I deliberately actually go after the spider to kill it, not because of the treasure, but to actually just get the XP for doing it, because Defuax has snuck in and stolen it already, as the monsters aggroed on something else. I mean, it is nice not having to worry about hunger. I mean, I do like the hunger mechanic, but it can be a bit RNG at times, depending on how the level goes. I wish that they were going to implement the hunger properly. You would have food equally spread out on all the levels, because the further you go down, the less food you find. So unless you hoard it like an absolute squirrel, oh, this is bad. Yeah, I basically start off a trap. I didn't realise this. I walked into a trap room, got locked into a room full of trolls and spiders, with no armour, little health, and little to nothing, no magic, and so I'm hiding here in the dark, trying not to attract attention. I think I was rather lucky that I didn't have a lantern or anything on me, because that would have probably aggroed the monsters. I wish I'd realised at the time, because I would have put that lantern out, but I sort of hide in this room away from the spiders and sort of pray to my partner to come and save me, because there was no way that I was getting out of this one alive. I don't like this trap room. I mean, good on the developers for designing it, because it's absolutely a horrendous thing, and it's a very NPC thing. I mean, a very D&D thing to do. But God, do I hate it. Yeah, basically the troll's been aggroed, so I'm hightailing it out of there, try and save my companion. I mean, trolls are very good for leveling up. To be honest, that's one of the main benefits that they have, is the leveling up. If you want a lot of XP very quickly, you want to basically deal with the trolls. Easiest way to do it is to do range combat and to run around in circles, because backpedaling in this game is, I think, about at a quarter your movement speed, so it's better to keep moving. That's why I tend to run past monsters and keep running, because you can outpace monsters a lot easier than you can backtracking. I saw some of the more smart people have noticed we were suffering slightly from lag at this point. That's why you had the slight slow motion effect. Yeah, as Defuax said, and I've looked into it, I always thought that mouldy food automatically made you lose your hunger, but it's a 50-50% chance depending, which isn't fantastic, to be honest, but it could be worse. So that's something to consider if you guys are playing with the hunger turned on, is that it's a 50-50 chance with mouldy food, so don't eat it unless you really need to eat it. I do like this game, I do love Barony, it's a brilliant little game. Massively underrated in my opinion. I mean, they could add some more, like, RNG to it, like more random levels or stuff, or just mix the levels up so the levels weren't in such a set order, because that would be interesting. Or maybe have like different bosses. Like I mean the end bosses, the Baron, yes, it's like he's insanely tough and like on a Dark Souls level of toughness. But it would be nice if you, like, once you completed the game, you had like other bosses to fight. It would be interesting. Stay away from the troll. The troll is not your friend. I mean, I'd be happy to pay for it for DLC, to be honest, if the developers want to put DLC into the game, and if they say, well, have a boss pack, have like randomised bosses that that you can have, because the only bosses you really have in this game are the minotaur on the labyrinth level, really. I mean, I suppose you can fight like the minotaur that turns up here as well, but the two proper bosses are, in my opinion, the minotaur on the minotaur level, because he's like double the toughness of the normal minotaur, and the final boss. It'd be nice if you had, I don't know, the option to have different end bosses. Just once you've completed the game, it gives you the option to basically play with different bosses, just so that the ending isn't just quite as predictable. I mean, the end boss fight is a nightmare. I mean, first time I played this game with the Fuax, I died in like a minute, and he spent the next 9 minutes running around trying to kill the boss on his own, because the boss is that hard. I mean, I don't know what you could do with the boss to make it more balanced. I suppose you could make him, I mean, to be honest, he is relatively weak in combat. If you get close to him in combat, he's actually relatively weak to physical damage. But obviously he's massively overpowered in the magic department, so you eat an absolute face full of fireballs to do it. Is there anything else? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'd like some more bosses and stuff, some more randomization, or maybe allowing us, once you've completed like the vanilla sort of first playthrough, it would allow you to sort of tweak the game, like you had options to like switch the levels around, or just add stuff to the game. I don't know. I mean, I'd happy to have DLC for this. If the developers want to make DLC for this game, I'd be happy to have DLC, like expanded stuff, like more sort of like replayability and stuff. That would be really cool, because I think a lot more people would play this game if it had more like rogue-like aspects added to it, like more bosses and more levels and stuff like that, more like zones. I mean, some more zones would be nice, like having like an ice zone, or like an ice zone would be nice, or having like an undead zone, or just something that tweaks it up a bit more, having some more monsters or something like that. I mean, having some more monsters would be really cool. Like, or just have varieties of the monsters, have like different spiders and different rats, and or have like a mother rat that spawns little rats like you have in Nuclear Throne. That would be really cool, or something like that. Just having some extra mobs running about, or I don't know, like have something that summons, have like an enemy that summons like lesser enemies, like having like a lesser lech or something that summon skeletons or something like that. Just have sub bosses, have like some more sub bosses. That would be really cool. So we always do what we're doing at this point, and it's just literally like exploring, constantly exploring. I mean, we're pretty much near the end of the first sort of quarter of this game, because the game sort of divided into like 4 bits, which is sort of like, for mine, you have the mine, what I call the forest, and the mine, the forest, sort of like the maze, and then you have the keep, or the dungeon itself. This is the bit I was talking about the annoyance with NPCs, because once I finished about how to get this blasted lockbox open, much to my frustration, I find inside it to be a magical bow, which I am very to be honest, I loved it. I absolutely loved the bow, and once the game crashed, and we managed to get it restarted the first time, but the crash deleted the bow, which I was really sad about. I dropped the bow and the NPC takes it. This is basically what happens, which I'm enraged with, as you see. And so I want the bow back, so I decide that I'm just going to kill the NPC. Well, that's okay, to be honest, it was an accident. I actually didn't mean to attack the NPC, and it's not advisable to do it. The shopkeepers, who are probably like one of the hardest hardest mobs in the game, yeah, basically what happens is I accidentally fire an unlock spell at him and he takes offence. This bow is really good because it did poison damage, which is really cool. But yeah, as you can see, we're punching him and it just does no damage to the bloke at all. The NPCs against players do like no damage, which I find really frustrating. I wish I could have shown you more of this, but the rest of the footage was corrupted beyond usage, really, so it's just gonna have to be how it is. If you guys have liked, please subscribe. If you wish to... Well, if you have liked, press the like button. If you wish to subscribe, press the subscription button. You can leave comments in the comment section below. I'm always happy to read them. At this point, I suddenly realised that my stuff is basically breaking all over the place, and I'm in desperate need of supplies. We managed to kill the bloke, which is a good thing. But I'm going to leave you here for now. Cornish-Knight, signing off.